Almeida. She's her fourth year PhD at the Laboratory of Urbanism, and she will be presenting us Power Spatialities in Company Towns, the modern biopolitical project in Northern Italy.
So hello, everybody. Thanks for coming for this event, and thanks for your attention now. So today I will try not to present my whole thesis, of course, because I just have 10 minutes. I'm in the fourth year, so I'm trying to focus in a very specific characteristic of my thesis and a very specific theoretical framework, in which I invite you today to follow me through this kind of historical archival research that I'm conducting, to have this kind of theoretical and political background on my thesis, and also with some travel diaries that described my case study through the years, especially in the middle of the 20th century. So, for instance, in the northern Italy, we had a lot of company towns cases. We had several cases of cities constructed, built by one industry that with the industrial capital and sustained by the fascism period, especially in the first part of the 20th century, grow up in the northern Italy. Among these cases, I have studied, and I have, and my case study for my thesis is the city of Dalmine, located between Bergamo and Milan, next to the A4 highway. And this city is very interesting because it was constructed by sorry, there's a problem with, yes, I just step up some slides, sorry. So this city is located between Milan and Bergamo, and I have a problem with the, okay, sorry. And this city, it was founded in 1906 by the Mannesmann company that comes from Germany and installed they works on the northern Italy. So it was a way to colonize new markets by the German industry coming and placing them in the northern Italy. And as you can see, this area was very rural before, and something that it's very important to understand in the context of company towns is that most of them were placed in non-urbanized areas to really construct from zero this kind of cities. It was as well the case of Dalmine. So Dalmine was very important for Mussolini, for instance. And something that I will bring today for you is what the fascism regime talked about the importance of Dalmine and the first strike that was happening in Dalmine in 1990 to the 1919 to the history of work in Italy. For instance, this document from the 1940s talks that, but fascism unionism can also be assigned a birth certificate and date in the Dalmine episode. And this document also shows up that after the Dalmine strikes, in which the workers occupied the industry without stopping the production, but it was a kind of creative strike, in the words of Mussolini. He defined the national necessity after the Dalmine case of directing Italian labor not only towards the interests of workers, but of Italian industry and for the good of the whole people in Italy. So placing Dalmine in this context It's interesting to understand how the support of the fascism regime was important to shape this peasant, this rural man that was working in the countryside, and shaping them to a new modernity, this modernity that was required by Mussolini and by the regime to be a modern subject. And yes, and taking with another document to talk about this kind of microhistory of Dalmine, we can also pick up the Italia nelle sue opere esistenziali of 1933, in which Mussolini tells that the clever capitalists are not only concerned with paychecks, but also with houses, schools, hospitals, and sports fields to the workers. So it was not for him a matter of paternalism, as some would like to define, but this welfare activity was fundamental to the creation of quality of life in these company towns. And he pointed out also the question of a sort of biopolitics, in which they affirm in this document that it was instead exquisitely political and human work, rooting more and more in the conscience of the workers the basic principle of corporate coordination. This panorama was not only in Dalmine, but as I said in the first slide, it was really shaped in different small cities that was founded by the industry in the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. So we have, for instance, here Piedmont and Lombardy and different other case studies that are relevant to understand this. And for instance, also the city of Dalmine. But the interesting thing in this case study is that not everything was flowers, and not everybody was agreeing with this kind of condition. For instance, we have this testimonial for Ernesto Friggero, which was one from the anti-fascism movement inside Dalmine, and he was very shocked when he arrived to Dalmine in 1939, in which the industry had the full control of the city and the politics of the city, and he discovered that if you want to enter the plant, you need to have a fascist card, otherwise you don't get in. And this was also an important point for the strikes of Dalmine, because in my work, for instance, I never talked about the strikes in Dalmine, but I start reading, especially L'Unità, that is a left journal in Italy, and for instance, Dalmine was place of a different kind of strikes that makes us understand this kind of politics with the fascism regime and this kind of control over the worker. It was not only a perfect city for the workers, but it was also some kind of question. It was questioned by the workers, especially here on the top part. You have the direction broke the law, wanting to make a paternalistic concession. So, for instance, this idea of the industry that had this kind of control, like a father that controlled the industry, was very, very present. And in this sense, another document that show up the Dalmine case is this kind of albums, almanacs of Dalmine that talk about this kind of interest in controlling the behaviors of the workers to make them feel a part of a group. Another important thing that, for instance, is important to understand this context that I'm doing right now to understand this political context in a broader way, it's some kind of notebooks, taccuini, and travel guides in Italy. For instance, Guido Piovani, Viaggio in Italia in 1957, interviewed some of people in Italy, and we had this kind of, I will quote him, our workers, a Dalminese executive told me, do not live concentrated, but spread and over to 215 different municipalities to which they return in the evening. This is the rule of the Bergamasques, the region, a province where large concentrations of working class, industrial, but people peasant-minded. So he really strikes on the fact that despite being in an industrial city, people had this kind of peasant-minded. This leads to the biopolitics of the company town, in which, in a broader level, the industry built and constructed in different cities next to the company town of Dalmine, different housing for its workers. It was also known that the industry was managed the health conditions of children of the workers in the company towns with different kind of biological procedures, health procedures for the children, for the people that live in this company town. And also, another reference for my work is ofthe, La Linea Gotica. It's a small book in which he traveled between different industrial cities in Italy, and he describes this kind of inhabited place inside the industry, in which he talks about this kind of old man wearing a miserable hat, seems to be standing by a miracle. And then he described the situation outside the industry, in which he talks about Dalmine is a company town, all new of cottages and gardens for trees, Swiss style, dwelling, employees and executives, wives with children. We a social life among the cottages and conifers with nannies, gossips, and baby carriers. So we have a different situation between inside and outside the industry, but not everybody was allowed to have this kind of quality of life. For instance, this was a very important politic on the Dalmine case, in which the industry controlled and managed all the industry and all the agricultural fields in the land besides the industry. And they had the enterprise for managing the food production for the consumption inside the industry, in which this dichotomy between the peasant man and the modern industrial worker was really applied to these characteristics of the city, and is still today something very present in the city. Another point that to conclude my presentation is that my research is very historical, in which I pick up all these important questions. But of course, always seeing the nowadays of the city, because the interesting thing is that despite most of company towns closed their doors in the 80s and 90s, Dalminese is still there and is still producing the same kind of production, and now is a multinational. And you see an image from the 70s and from 2022, and the kind of the level of infrastructural level is completely different. And I'm trying to understand to which kind of extent rural and urban areas are living together. Thank you.
Thank you, Karla, for your presentation, which found very interesting. I maybe would make an observation in the way in which we use the terms biopolitics. Because it's a very crucial term in your thesis, and you have it in the titles. And of course, there is an assumption that Dalmine was an ideological project, as you have shown in this bold claims, but it was also a biopolitical project, because it was really organizing the life of inhabitants in an extremely totalizing way. Not only focusing on work, but production, but also reproduction. So I assume that the term biopolitics is correct, in the thesis. But I think you have to be aware that this term has a very important philosophical history. I mean, we all know it was introduced by Michel Foucault in his famous lectures in the Collège de France. And in Italy, actually, had a very strong philosophical history, especially between the 90s and the 2000s. And there are three important authors who have used this term very thoroughly in their philosophical studies. I mean, and of course, they're very important because they take very different positions. One, of course, is Giorgio Agamben, who used the term biopolitics in a very critical way. In a way, he sees in biopolitics really the development of a new form of politics that is also very problematic in a way. And then you have Tony Negri, that has developed an opposite view on biopolitics, almost as an affirmative project, in the sense that it's true that contemporary capitalism or modern capitalism is biopolitical, but this also gives a chance for its subaltern subjects to expand around power. So you have to situate, your position in this debate. It's in which way you are using this term, because I think it has profound consequences, not only actually in the way you narrate the history of Dalmine, but also in your understanding of its present and future. So I think that for me is really a crucial question that you have to answer. Actually, there is one interesting footnote to this debate that I also happen to know very well. Actually, one of the very first attempts to introduce the discourse on biopolitics in architecture and planning was by a scholar that unfortunately has been not very well known as it should, because he was the one that really introduced this term. And this guy's the scholar is Andrea Cavalletti.
Yes, the biopolitical city. Yes, La Città Biopolitica. Yes. Yes, I know. I have him.
Andrea, actually, from the 90s, introduced this term into architectural discourse, and it's the first. It's absolutely the first. Really, the first, of course, is Paul Rabinov, who's working with Foucault, but Cavalletti was the one that really introduced this, and actually it was within Secchi's, Bernardo Secchi's class, let's say. I happen to know Andrea because I was a student of Secchi at that time, and I have to be honest, it took me a bit of a while to understand what was this biopolitics. I mean, I remember in the late 90s, I had like endless discussions with my student mates. We're all like wondering, what is this biopolitics? Big question. And of course, Andrea was very much developing the position that later on became propaganda. In fact, at a certain point, there was a war between Andrea and Agamben, because I think that Andrea was really the one that really influenced also Agamben's definition of biopolitics. Sorry to make this kind of microhistory of the intellectual history in Italy, but I think it's very important for your thesis. I think that that perspective on biopolitics is a very crucial, something that you have to clarify at the beginning of your thesis, or at the end, I don't know, because it will cast a very important light on your position.
Thank you, Aurelie. Yes, for instance, it was not the goal for my presentation today to define the biopolitics, because I'm still figuring out what biopolitics is. But I can say that I'm not in the side of the too bad or too good biopolitics. I'm trying to place myself in the middle, because I think that this kind of management for the industry to the company towns had a lot of good points to improving the quality of the cities. I think in a general way in the world, because the company town is a worldwide phenomenon, we can say. But for instance, in the other side, it was also a way to manage it, to control for profit. So I really have to take in account this dichotomy between the good and the bad of the biopolitical project. And yes, I have the book of Cavaletti, and I've been reading it, despite it's very difficult to understand as a non-Italian speaker, I can say.
Sorry, just one. Can I just add a comment? I don't think we can speak about good and bad biopolitics. I mean, okay, that's a very long discussion. I think that it's a little bit more subtle than that. The question is whether biopolitics was the ground for emancipation. So lately we say yes. So biopolitics is a new platform for capital struggle and eventual emancipation. And then there is a more critical perspective of Gamble, who said, well, be careful. That is not really so easy. And I think that for me, I have to say, although Gamble now has this appeal of a Cassandra-like philosopher, I think that I'm not sharing the optimism of Negri, to be honest. I think that the specter of the camp, what Gregotti writes in that letter that you gave to me, is very important. I mean, at the end, it's like taking people and organizing their life, and without people also being aware
of the situation. Yes.
And now I'm commenting from the other side, which is from the side that I have no idea about the internal debates. I mean, I've heard you present before. I have two questions. First is like in an era in which there's strong kind of like industry nostalgia, but not only in Italy but in Europe at large. For me, a question is to what degree the success of this company, the fact that it still exists, and it depends on the success, at least for the sake of the industry, of this biopolitical side. Meaning, if you could argue that the fact that this company managed to still survive the industrial apocalypse in Europe has or not a connection directly for how they administrated life itself. Which I think would be a kind of amazing kind of like claim to make that because we know that even all the early ambitious projects in either in Germany or in Austria in terms of like seedlings in the 20s is a counterpart of industrial production. It's like the reproductive side of the productive side of industry. But this month, for whatever reason, did not
work.
So here it would be interesting for me to hear to what degree these two things are connected and what are the consequences of that. Do we need to accept that we have to have total control of life in order to have a successful industrial model? No, I mean, for me, this is one question. The second is in the life side of the industry, where did the models really come from? Is something that is they were producing their own architectural knowledge, quote unquote, or they would really import as they were importing the types from Germany? Were they importing as well, kind of like the spatial and architectural spores? Are these really seedlings of the seedling movement or garden city, or where does it?
Okay. I will answer. So for the second question, yes, it's a sort of garden city, we can say, but adapted to the Lombardy context. So, for instance, for the workers' neighborhood, they had this kind of small garden in which they can plant their own food. Okay. For the other side, for the employees' neighborhood, they had a kind of garden with the nannies and the children playing, like a beautiful garden, but not to produce food, for example. This model was made by only one architect from the 20s to the 50s, Giovanni Greppi, which was an architect from Milan. And he conceived all the neighborhoods, the central neighborhoods, and the facade of the the industry. It was between the city garden and a kind of Italian rationalism, especially with the facade of the industry and some kind of other buildings. Inside the industry, yes, they are pioneers in different pipe productions until today. So why, answering your first question, why they are still today there? Because they had, first they are big and they are still necessary because pipes, you need to do oleoducts and gas ducts and other things like this. And it was a succession of public and private management, because in the 70s and 80s they had a problem, so they had financial support from the government and so on. And then in 1996, they were bought by the same family that in the 50s escaped from the fascism regime, because they are all fascists. They went to Argentina. They found another city named Dalmine Campana, next Buenos Aires, and they constructed a colossus with the same kind of production in Argentina, also in Brazil, also in Houston, in US and other places.
That's the answer to the question. Okay.
Okay.
But this has to be part of the story.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. For instance, I had a presentation like 1 month ago at the typology with Aureli, and I presented some of the projects for Campana in Argentina. My first guess for my thesis was to make a comparative study between Argentina and Italy, but due to the COVID, I had almost 2 years of COVID in the meantime, and I'm coming next week to Dalmine to do another 3 months of field work, my last 3 months.
And Karla, we have lots of opportunity to discuss today, so all nice. I'm trying maybe to develop a bit about biopolitical project in the science text. There is a theoretical base, there are some theoretical positions. And what about doing a PhD on this kind of theme here? If it is maybe not to understand which kind of expertise and disciplines, in fact, are involved in conception and improvement and implementation of, and in particular, architecture, as you say, and in particular, beyond the discipline space itself, in which way is it mobilized, shaped, bought, sold, I don't know, in order to maybe put this biopolitical project in practice. It's very, direct question that I ask you. I ask you because, in fact, as in the last seminar, we discovered that maybe a small part of the population of Dalmine live in Dalmine, close to the
Factory.
Exactly. And a lot of other people are in a more invisible places, or places maybe, I don't know, which are not in fact labeled Dalmine, and you can't know that Dalmine is there anyway. So this is also a point. You show these particular places of experimental practice, daily experimental practice, children, health, government, and so on. But if a so wide political project is in fact successful, what's really the part of space if a small part of the space is projected, designed, or in which other way, through which other space can be the support of this political project? Maybe other, it's not the design, it's not.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you, Elena. Yes, I needed to understand how to spatialize these theories. And I needed to understand that in Dalmine, in which extent it was done. I think that it's mainly the question that you are doing, or I didn't get it.
Not in which way we can spatialize the political theory per se, but in which way a political project, which has not the theory as like political one, it doesn't know that it is the biopolitical project, it is the project, social project, economical one. In which way it is successful through space.
I mean, for instance, in this list, we have not the cities in which the people are coming from, but the cities in which Dalmine built housing. So these cities are very dispersed on the territories. For that reason that in the last slide, I come back with this map, because I think very interesting that in 54, we have this big mass of Dalmine on the crux. And then we have this kind of beginning of a different kind of industries, concentrations, this kind of city territory that started to develop, and it's through production that this happens, I think, I suppose. Thank you.
Yeah, I was wondering on something similar, like how does this sort of, so like it's transition from, because you're doing trans-temporal
Yes, it's a long durée. So
work, which is very interesting, which allows to understand so many different things beyond like economic transitions. So the transition that you need into neoliberal state now, and I because I've read other parts of your work, one like in the book, it is interesting because you also look at philanthropy.
Yes.
Like so philanthropy of companies and company town. And I personally am really interested in this 3 months that you're going to spend there. Is how does the company perhaps hold the project of reform or revolution in this larger territory? Because it's sort of okay. I mean, the way I understand this question is also that it was like in the until the Canadian state, it was really like in this company down there. It's also of housing and of like the territorial relations beyond, much beyond, far beyond. And perhaps there might be some subversive philanthropic investments in space and time that allow for this territory to be held as a productive, in a productive relationship. In order to still be able to extract cheap labor out of it, right? Because that's the only perhaps way in neoliberal economy that it can survive as your economic entities extracting. So perhaps that's a question to look at more closely.
okay, thank you. Javier, you want to the microphone?
No, very quickly, thanks, Karla, for your presentation. So coming back to your title, power specialities in company towns. So for me, always the moment where you put these two words kind of together, like space and power, there is always about the history of space design, like the question of how far can system of power see in space. It's always a question. Power is constructed upon the idea of access to information, control, visibility, etc. And it doesn't matter when we talk about empires or religion. Now you're talking about company towns, but you have these two words in your title. So for me, this is very clear. And I was just wondering, while looking at your presentation and all the material that you are putting on display, for me, it will be fascinating to discover what is out of visual reach in this kind of companies. So, meaning by that, mainly probably the interiors or the private interiors or the domestic interiors, and to discover a source of inverted historiography, a bottom-up kind of historiography. If we see this picture that you put, black and white picture, bird's eye view of the houses, maybe you can go back to that picture.
Yes.
With the houses, the villas,
Yes, it's the first one.
Yeah, this one.
Okay,
So, I mean, we know this kind of cities, so we have seen thousands of them
yes.
all across the history of architecture. And you know, even the image, the kind of image is fabricated because there is a professional photographer, there's a helicopter, blah, 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 blah. And then everything is published according to certain standards and this journalism. For me, what would be like fascinating is to unravel what happened visually inside each of these houses with different kind of amateur photography, the domestic archives, the narrative that happened inside it, the kind of contract that the workers of the factory had inside these houses. And how maybe we look as I don't know, like one picture per house, could we tell that they are coming all from the same houses or not? You know, as mechanisms of persistence, appropriation, hacking, editing, etc. And I think that this is an important historiography of the discipline that has to be playing not only for this city, but for other cities, like it's kind of urbanism from the inside, you know, an urbanism of interiors, actually, that is trying to react, to contest, and to individualize the top-down phenomenon of 20th century urbanism, like, or kind of industrial urbanism. So for me, I think that this should be part of, you have access to this kind of vernacular archives from the communities, etc. This should be part of your research. I would be fascinated to discover it.
Thank you, Javier. It's a very interesting point because in my research, I'm working directly with the business archives of the industry. And the interesting thing on my research is that all the history of the city is not in the municipality. It's inside a business archive, inside the industry that still holds all the information. But they had a kind of foundation in which they share this kind of knowledge to the community. So the propaganda was a very important meaning, had a very important meaning on this company town and most of the other company towns. They have proper photographers to photograph all the activities. For instance, they have 40,000 photographies of all the kind of actions that they did in the industry. And I'm going to these 3 months to work inside this archive. It's I will pass 9 months in the end inside the archives already. And I have this problem. I'm working with the business archive and I have difficulties to have another kinds of archives. I need to these 3 months that I'm going now to really reach out to this kind of family photographs, the domesticity inside the houses, because for instance, the archive of Dalmine, they have a lot of photos of this perfect world inside this this town. But if I search about the photos inside home or so on, we have just one movie from Instituto that you can see some frames of the houses inside, but you don't have a lot of photos of inside the houses from the industry. So it's something that I have to come back and search for.
The last comment, sorry to be fastidious about
Go.
It's very important.
I know.
Because also, I think there is something interesting here, because, you know, biopolitics was introduced by Michel Foucault when he realized that basically modern politics are no longer about representation. You know, like, you know, the king, the monarch, the cathedral, the church, but about the management of the daily practices. And I think what is interesting here that you are dealing with a case study that sits between this, you know, politics or ideology and biopolitics, because company towns, as you rightly say, are also propaganda. I mean, they need this kind of constant, you know, representational apparatus, you know, to become models for other, you know. So there is something very ideological in company towns. But I think that that's not biopolitical. So you have to actually somehow be very careful when you address this kind of more propaganda aspect of company down, which definitely exists and it's very important. Like today, you know, when we look to these projects by Facebook, whatever, there is really a propaganda aspect. But then there is the biopolitical aspect, which is actually the part that remains. Because one of the fundamental goals of biopolitics is to remain elusive. to traditional political representation. And I think that here, you know, you have a perfect case study where you can see the overlapping of these two aspects of politics, you know, the ideology and biopolitics. But I think you have to be very, very precise because you're dealing with categories that are, you know, have a very strong tradition in political theory. And if you use them, you have to be a bit more precise. But I think it could be really interesting because I think that the company down, in fact, you know, that you show this material are in fact not just biopolitical, they are also ideological. And the two conditions in a way work reinforce each other.
Sorry.
Yes,
One
please.
take your paper and suggested to read my paper
Okay.
on something that I wrote on a company down by a Japanese manufacturer in India. Where I was looking at similarly like this sort of, you know, territorial relationships, and I was calling these settlements as tenement towns.
Tenement towns, okay.
Deconstruct this sort of like, but I would now recommend you read that paper. At that time, I did not because I didn't want you to cite it and because it was so bad. But it might be useful exactly for the reasons that you just pointed. Because it is indeed an ideological project and it allows you to sort of not visibilize, but you know, deconstruct it in many ways. I can send you the.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe just before we go on to the next one, if there are any questions from the audience. No, okay. Okay, so thank you very much, Almeida.